Good morning. I'm John Neidy, and I'm Gen X.
I'm Dominic Vallosio, and I'm a millennial.
I'm cynical.
I'm entitled.
I'm apathetic.
I'm lazy.
I'm moody.
I'm self-centered.
I'm a leader of today.
And I'm a leader of tomorrow.
And with all due respect to our parents, and with their previously obtained permission, we'd like to take a few minutes and point out some of their generational stereotypes too. My parents belong to the silent generation. And Mom, you can't learn new technology.
My parents are baby boomers. And Dad, you spend too much time in meetings.
Dad, you were too patriotic. Stars and striped boxers? Seriously?
Mom, I'm sorry, but you micromanage.
Mom, you were too top-down. Yes, I checked with my supervisor before agreeing to do this.
Dad, you work too much. Shouldn't you be at work now anyways?
Dad, Mom, you helped rebuild our great nation, and we are indebted to you for that.
Mom and Dad, you're both loyal, and you've created a society in which I can succeed. Thank you. Now we want to acknowledge that the stereotypes we just shared are just that, stereotypes. Every generation has them, however unfair or untrue they may be. But there are certain qualities and trends that define each generation. And although they may be generalizations, I hope that you are patient with us as we use them and this brief history lesson.
Volunteerism and philanthropy are the backbone of American spirit and democracy. When Alexander de Tocqueville came to the United States in 1831, he accurately observed that we were one of the greatest countries in the world because of our ability to assemble and our willingness to volunteer. Sadly, this sort of volunteerism has been in decline for the past 50 years. The effect this has had on society cannot be underestimated. A decline in volunteerism means that government has had to step in and fulfill some of the roles that voluntary organizations once filled. Some even argue that this decline in associational life is one of the primary reasons behind the widening income inequality in the US. But there is hope in our local communities and our local community organizations.
So this is our thesis. We need to fundamentally rethink how to use our best resources to tackle these issues. And these resources are our volunteers. Understanding what motivates the four generations is the first step to fostering a vibrant, dynamic, and engaged community. Though associational membership and civic engagement is down, Americans are now volunteering and giving back more than ever. So it is imperative that we understand what motivates the generations so that we can utilize every volunteer to their fullest potential. Luckily, academics much smarter than us have compiled mountains of research about the generations, and here's what we've learned.
So let's take the silents. Born between 1925 and 1945, they are the silent generation. I'd invite them to come up here and speak for themselves, but that wouldn't be too exciting, would it? As any middle kid knows, you'll never live up to your older sibling, and your younger sibling will get away with everything. The same can be said for this generation. The generation that came before them came home from the war and set about nation building. The generation that came after them, those boomers, challenged every convention in the world and conventional wisdom in every arena. This tension stuck with them. They were the generation that led the way in making divorces more prominent, and they coined the term midlife crisis. Yet despite all of this, they were quite successful. Being a relatively small generation, it took less for any one individual to get ahead. They didn't rock the boat, mainly because they didn't have to. When Time magazine named them the silent generation in 1951, it was because of their conscientious and careful approach to their careers, their family, and their personal lives. The silents embodied the patriotism and communitarianism they grew up with during the war. But this doesn't mean they weren't afraid to make the necessary changes in society. This generation produced Martin Luther King Jr. This generation produced the Beatles. And revolutionaries like Abby Hoffman and Gloria Steinem. Silents want to be needed. Successful organizations will appeal to their communalism and sense of sacrifice. Let them know that they are appreciated and that their experience is vital to improving not only your organization, but the country as a whole. They may be dubbed the silent generation, but they do not want to go out quietly.
And then there are the baby boomers. the largest generation in history, born between 1946 and 1964. When the boomers' parents returned home from the war, they wanted nothing more than a quiet, stable life in the suburbs with 2 cars in the driveway and a white picket fence around the house. Their kids, however, had other things in mind. The boomers were the generation of drugs, sex, and rock and roll, the generation that took the society their parents created and turned it upside down. But the older they got, the more they started to crave the titles and wealth they railed against in their youth. They worked hard, competed mightily, and burned out quickly. The older they got, they started to question where the fire of their youth went. Where did that passion go? This was the generation that traded in their VW bus for a BMW sports car. The generation that moved out of the commune and into the gated community. An idealistic generation that set aside their grand aspirations for a more practical life to meet their needs and the needs of their children. But that idealistic spark is still there, and boomers are finding new ways to engage it. When surveyed, the #1 reason that they stay at work is to make a difference. And if they can't find it at work, they will look elsewhere, which is why boomers are volunteering at levels unprecedented in history. And at work, they want the same things that they want, when volunteering, they want the same things that they want at work, which is to make a difference, to be recognized for their impact, and titles. If you want to engage a boomer, put them on a board or committee and give them a title and responsibilities. They'll love it. If you want to thank a super engaged boomer, give them an award. Now, I could go on and on with some more qualities about the baby boom generation, but frankly, if you're able to take a morning off in the middle of a work week and pay $40 to listen to people speak, you're probably a boomer.
Now, I know what you Gen Xers are thinking. Here we are now. Entertain us. The generation born between 1965 and 1980 represented a small population compared to the generations on either side, much like the silence. We came of age when America seemed to be in decline. Watergate irreparably damaged the presidency. 3 Mile Island invoked fears of environmental catastrophe, and the gas shortage and stagflation were seen as harbingers of an economically inept country. For the first time, a generation, my generation, was told that we would probably not be as well off as our parents. We were left at home to care for our siblings while both of our parents worked, if we were lucky enough to have parents who were still married. Coupled with the socioeconomic atmosphere of the time, it's hardly a surprise that we became highly independent, justifiably cynical, and felt like the future wasn't in our control. That smells a little bit like teen spirit, doesn't it? Yet despite all of this, Gen X has made the best of our situation. The world around us changed rapidly. While computers got much, much smaller, our social networks and community involvement got larger. We spurned the traditional Knights of Columbus-like organizations for less traditional things like sports clubs, dinner clubs, book clubs, and PTOs. We are giving back, just not in the same way our parents did. When we get involved, we prefer the autonomy and trust to do the tasks assigned to us. We are doers who believe that the way it has always been done is not always the right way. Fundamentally, we just want you to remember, in the words of the great John Hughes, you see us how you want to see us, in the simplest terms, in the most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each of us is a brain and an athlete and a basket case, a princess and a criminal. Does that answer your question?
And then there are the millennials, the echo boomers, Generation Y. Whatever you call us, the generation born between 1980 and 2000 is now the largest living generation. We were born when America was the unrivaled superpower of the world. But then during our formative years, things seemed to take a turn for the worse. 9/11, Katrina, the financial collapse, Steve Bartman. We came of working age during the worst economy since the Great Depression. And we were told we needed to go to college. So now we're the best educated, and, thanks to skyrocketing tuition, most indebted generation in history. We were told to follow our passions. So now we have a degree in history and fear companies won't give us a future. Yet, despite all of this, we are more optimistic about this future than previous generations were at our age. Just as millennials are famously not loyal to the companies they work for, we're also not loyal to charitable institutions either. But we are loyal to causes. Though we may not have a lot of money to give to these causes, We view our time and our network as equally valuable when giving back, which is why for many of us, sharing our cause with 1,000 Facebook friends can sometimes be just as effective as giving $1,000 to that cause. And frankly, we don't really care about how much your organization raises. What we care about is what kind of impact you've made. And the same is true when it comes to volunteering. We are not content to just show up to a committee meeting once per month and consider it a job well done. We want to roll our sleeves up, get our hands dirty, and affect real change. And the same is true in our careers. We pursue work that has meaning, but we're realistic in accepting that that sometimes means moving back home and having a lower salary. The research shows our generation is innovative, entrepreneurial, and truly believes we can make a difference. All we ask is that you let us.
Now that we've shared some highlights of each of the generations, we're going to tell you about how one organization has overcome generational adversity by engaging volunteers from the silent, baby boomers, Gen X, and millennial generations. As we discuss this organization and its volunteers, we urge you to consider how you might use these ideas in your own work and with your own volunteers. The organization, we'll call it the Youth Development Association, or the YDA, provides after-school programs to kids in a low-income part of town. Like other local agencies, the budget impasse in Springfield has left them with no state funding for their programs.
Therefore, the YDA has had to lean heavily on their volunteer base to keep their doors open and their programs running. They've been successful in identifying what motivates the four generations. So we're going to tell you a brief story about how the YDA was able to engage 4 individuals, one from each generation, and how they were able to give back and be a part of the solution.
So let's take Shirley. She's 74 years old and a widow of the silent generation. She was a stay-at-home mom who graduated with a degree in education, which she only used until her first child was born. She raised 4 children while her husband worked. About 5 years ago, she moved to a high-end retirement community where she chairs both the welcome and gardening committees. Shirley is a very active volunteer and a very active senior. The YDA engaged Shirley by tapping into her sense of commitment and duty, as well as her experience in education. They have invited her to come in 4 days a week to work with kids on their literacy skills. They have also engaged Shirley to recruit other retirees. The kids with whom she works have come to value her consistent and caring presence in their lives. Shirley has come to value the way she's giving back to our community and shaping the future leaders of our nation. The YDA acknowledges her loyalty and the loyalty of her recruits by monthly lunches with the executive director.
And then there's Bob. Bob is 61 years young and smack dab in the middle of the baby boom generation. He's married, has 2 kids, although they don't live at home anymore for now. And Bob has always been kind of involved. He loves his job, but he doesn't really see that being his legacy. He wants to get more involved. Recently, Bob's company bought a table at the YDA's fundraiser, and while he was at the event, he started talking to their executive director, who saw in Bob the potential to lead their upcoming fundraising campaign. Bob was thrilled to be asked. He had always been somewhat involved, as I said, with the YDA, but being given a title and responsibilities really got his competitive and hardworking juices flowing. And it was the most successful fundraising campaign in the agency's history, allowing them to keep their doors open and their programs running. The YDA, at the end of his term, thanked Bob for his service by giving him an award. He'll never forget that, and they've won a lifelong volunteer.
Jeff, the Gen Xer, is 46 years old and divorced. He and his ex-wife are on friendly terms, co-parenting their 15-year-old daughter. Jeff is an administrator in the local school district. He values the community and believes he should give back to that community to set a good example for his daughter. Jeff is good friends with the vice president of the YDA. Jeff and the vice president were discussing the organizational issues with the YDA and the financial issues when Jeff happened to mention the grant opportunity that came across his desk. Jeff offered to write the grant proposal on behalf of the YDA, and the vice president empowered Jeff to write the proposal by giving him access to the necessary data and people he needed to get it done. The YDA was awarded the grant, and the YDA sent Jeff's boss a letter acknowledging his work. Jeff is now committed to the YDA and is writing other proposals for them.
And finally, there's Megan. Megan is 28 years old and is a millennial, but she hates it when you call her that. She just moved out of her house, her parents' house, when she started a new career. And she really wants to give back, but she doesn't have a lot of money to do so. Luckily, her employer offers paid time off for their employees to volunteer. In fact, just like many millennials, Megan chose this company over its competitors because of their philanthropic record. One day at work, one of Megan's coworkers asked her if she wants to go do some landscaping at the YDA to make the place look more inviting. So Megan goes, and while she's there, she strikes up a conversation with their program director. The program director tells her a little bit about the organization, and Megan's interested. But then she mentions their literacy initiative. Megan's always had a passion for literacy. So this program director sees this passion in her and sees the potential, so she asks her to chair a fundraiser to raise awareness and funds for the organization. Megan is ecstatic that somebody is asking her to use her skills for her cause. So she goes all out. She creates a social media campaign. She gets all of her friends involved. The fundraiser ends up being a huge success. And the YDA realizes they can't lose people like this. They can't lose volunteers like Megan. So they asked her to chair a Young Leaders Advisory Committee that provides the YDA board with some younger and newer perspectives.
Although the YDA is a fictional organization, the lessons we can learn about how to engage volunteers from specific generations are not. While the stories of Shirley, Bob, Jeff, and Megan identify some of those ideas, there are also some concrete ways to value all volunteers. Dominic and I really want you to pay attention to these. We ask you to recognize volunteers' personal strengths and use those personal strengths to provide meaningful work for them. Supply them with the necessary tools to get the job done. If they need a paintbrush, give them a paintbrush. If they need an Excel spreadsheet, give them a spreadsheet. Seek their input and feedback. They are your best source of information for what changes to make in your organization. And finally, and most importantly, give genuine appreciation and gratitude.
So when we leave here today, we want you to remember three things. The first is that engaging and valuing our volunteers properly is the first step to fostering a vibrant and dynamic community. Secondly, whether we like it or not, we are all in this together, and we all have a part to play in it, so get out there and volunteer. And third, that each generation has its unique strengths, and that by understanding these strengths and utilizing them to their fullest potential, we can all be a part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you.